we stepped out of the theater in July 2019 after seeing Spider-Man Far From Home, when we knew the Infinity Saga was over, but Marvel Studio would announce its Phase 4 slate a few weeks later at San Diego Comic-Con. How could we have known we just entered the wait? The wait for new MCU content. 18 full months, the longest time without new content since the MCU began. Well, when that music of the Marvel Studios logo started last Friday, it felt amazing because the wait is over. Hello and welcome to our new review series for WandaVision, the first Marvel Studios show streaming on Disney+. Before we begin, I would like to invite anyone listening or watching to join us at Sakaar. Make an account, join the conversation, and if you want, you can participate on the podcast or review. We are open to anyone, really, we are. We will drop links in the description. Let me introduce today's panel. And that it was a long wait is shown by a big panel today. Everyone was eager to join in. Well, first up, I hope he doesn't come for you yet, but no, he will eventually, Lord Deathman.
Hey everybody, it's Lord Deathman out here in Sakaar, and I am excited to be here and to talk WandaVision.
As am I. Next we have, all the way from down under, my good friend, ShadowBiz.
Hi everyone, hello.
Our third panel member is Mr. Positivity himself, always dialed up to 11, Mr. Taylor First.
Hello, glad to be here.
And last, but certainly not least, our producer and the reason you are listening to us or watching us right now, the man with the plan, ArArArchStanton.
I haven't stopped thinking about this show. I was so excited when it first came on, and I absolutely can't wait to keep talking about it. Take it away.
Well, I said before, today we're going to talk about WandaVision. The first 2 episodes are streaming now on Disney+. We're going to talk spoilers, so if you haven't seen them yet, check them out first and then check out our review. That being said, in episode 1, we see Wanda and Vision wondering what the heart drawn on their calendar means. They don't know, which is odd actually. Wanda meets her neighbor Agnes after Vision leaves for work, and Agnes helps Wanda to set up a romantic anniversary dinner, which she believes the heart means. Vision, however, finds out the heart is actually an abbreviation for his boss, Mr. Hart, and his wife coming over for dinner. Well, this all leads up to a very strange evening. In episode 2, it shows Wanda and Vision preparing for a local fundraiser talent show for the children. They are practicing a magic trick. While Wanda gets to know her female neighbors at a planning committee meeting later, Vision meets the male ones at a neighborhood watch meeting at the library, where he consumes a stick of gum, which makes him malfunction a bit. And, well, Wanda has some strange thing going on herself. Well, we're going to talk now a little bit deeper about this whole show in the first 2 episodes. And I will turn to our panel, starting with Mr. Taylor first. And my question to you is, sir, well, what did you make of those 2 first episodes? And what can you tell me about the homages to old comedy shows, which they basically are? How good or bad were they done?
I thought this show was terrific. I thought it was spot on. I watched it for the first time last evening, and watched it again this morning. And I thought it was just brilliantly executed. They hit all of the beats. They're building that mystery in that slow burn sort of way that I really like, and which fits, a format like this, a TV series as opposed to an action movie. So my impression of the show, first two episodes, is 10 out of 10. So let's get that on the record. Secondly, the homages, brilliantly done, brilliantly executed. There was a lot of them in there. Now, the obvious ones, of course, the most obvious ones were the Dick Van Dyke Show and Bewitched. I love how in the opening credits he phased through the ottoman as opposed to tripping over it like Dick Van Dyke used to do in the beginning of his, only in the first couple of seasons. In the last couple of seasons, he jumped around it. But that was lovely that he phased through it. But there are a lot of others besides those 2 big ones. A lot of I Love Lucy in the way especially the closing credits of the first episode, had a lot of I Love Lucy pattern around it, although it was, instead of heart-shaped, it was that hexagon. I'm not quite sure what the meaning of that hexagon is, but it showed up a lot in these 2 episodes. And then the interaction between Wanda and the neighbor also had a lot of I Love Lucy. The exterior shots of the home and the neighborhood that they live in had, and some of Wanda's wardrobe had a lot of Leave It to Beaver vibe to it that people might not have picked up on. And then on the Vision side of it, yes, Wanda is a witch, and she did a lot of channeling of Samantha Stevens' Bewitched. But it's a little harder to find supernatural characters on the male side, but they do exist. And I saw a lot of my favorite Martian in Vision's behavior, especially during the magic show, and the fact that he has to change his face whenever someone's around, the same way Uncle Martin had to hide his antenna every time he went out or every time someone came around. And then there was a show, some of you may not have even heard of this one. There was a show in the early 60s called My Living Doll, which was about a NASA scientist who had to hide a beautiful female android in his home with him, played by the gorgeous Julie Newmar, who went on to play Catwoman in Batman 66. And the way that Vision had a tendency to kind of blurt out stuff that an android would blurt out and then try to backtrack it, or Wanda would step in and try to fix it, very much inspired by the My Living Doll show. She had no concept of controlling herself or not speaking the truth at any given moment. So there's a lot of them in there, and there's a lot of others too. There's a little bit of Honeymooners feel, mostly with the neighbor, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But of course, the whole show itself is Twilight Zone. It's very much a Twilight Zone episode, or a string of Twilight Zone episodes that we're going through right now. And I love the way they did it. I love how they went back and forth from a multicam sitcom with a live studio audience to a single cam sitcom with a laugh track. Those are 2 different styles of sitcoms, both from classic television and both still in use today. And they went back and forth very smoothly between those. I loved how the decor of the home in the first episode was closer to Dick Van Dyke, and the decor in the second episode was a little bit more like the Bewitched home. I think it's going to continue to evolve in that direction. But the way they did it, and the comedy, I don't know if they dug old comedy writers out of the grave from the 1960s to write this thing, but the comedy, the tropes, the misunderstandings, the how to cover up when something went wrong. Like, I love oh yes, that's the traditional Sokovian greeting. Oh yes, is that my host? Yes, welcome to my house. It was hilarious. I found a lot of the humor just playing as a sitcom. I think it would have worked. I think it was quite funny. I laughed a whole lot. So again, and there are others. I could talk about Burns and Allen and their interactions between the 2 of them. I Married Joan is another one, but I'm getting into the weeds on classic TV at this point. It's not relevant to the show. Just say that they did their research and they put it together beautifully and they executed excellently. That answers your question.
Well, Marvel Studios is not the only one who did the research. Excellent answer, Taylor. The hexagon, by the way, I think it's the Mind Stone, but we get to that later. Question number 2, and I will go to panelist number 2 I had, and that's ShadowBiz. Well, what did you think of the 2 first episodes? And, well, how was the cast to you? How did they perform? And do you expect some people to change their role in the future? And, yeah, who is this Ralph they're constantly talking about?
Well, yeah, overall the show was great. It was awesome. Like, at first I was taken a bit back because I knew from the trailers that it was gonna be black and white, but like I said in the thread that I thought the black and white was gonna stop at the first episode, but then continue in the second episode. I'm glad it changed to color because I didn't want a full black and white show. But yeah, from the trailers anyway. But the thing is, yeah, it was the cast is awesome. Elizabeth Olsen, not Wanda, and Paul Bettany, they're great. They're totally convincing. You can see them like as like a couple totally in love. As for like the rest of the characters, well, there was Geraldine, which was interesting because I thought I recognized her, and then I looked at the trailer, and then she happens to be the agent of S.W.O.R.D. Like she's Monica Rambeau. So yeah, so that's pretty cool that she's in there. But it seems like she does not know what she's doing, or maybe she's just pretending to be like I don't know, like an undercover for now, just to observe and study the situation, then maybe suggest stuff to Wanda later on to not like totally freak her out. As for Ralph, I looked into that. Like I didn't know who he meant because when I first watched it on my phone, you kind of miss certain details, and I was like after work and I was really tired. And then so like with Ralph, I saw a theory that he could be Mephisto, but it's a bit of a stretch. I mean, I know it's like Agnes, and I think she might have like a connection there. I'm not entirely versed in the comics in that area. Who else could Ralph be? No clue, to be honest. But yeah, the cast are awesome. I'm really excited to see what's going on. Oh, and by the way, this is so dumb. Because when I watched it a second time with like for the children, they mentioned it so many times. And I didn't pick up on it until I watched it a second time around that it like referred to the the actual children that Wiccan and Speed, like when she got pregnant. Yeah. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Okay, very good. Well, you're not so well versed in the comics in this case, maybe, but we have somebody on the panel who is, no doubt. So I turn to our third panelist, Lord Deathman. Can you share your thoughts? And, well, do you have something from the comics for us?
I do. I don't know if my expertise in the comic books is a bit overplayed at this point, but I'm sure happy to sort of go through some of the comic book references that I have seen in WandaVision. But I'll start with, in order to start this conversation about WandaVision, I think you really have to talk about Wanda and Vision and what that means to fans of those two characters. For as long as I've been reading comic books, or at least when I started reading them, Wanda and Vision has been a thing. They've been a couple. They have been in a romantic relationship, and they operate as partners, as crime fighters, and members of their respective superhero teams, be it the X-Men or the Avengers. And it was wonderful to see that being realized as far back as Joss Whedon. So I don't want to give WandaVision credit for sort of doing that. So I just feel that they've done something really wonderful in sort of taking that relationship that we'd seen for many years on the panel and putting it into live action. It's just kind of cool to see Wanda and Vision as a couple. And, you know, as a young reader reading this, and I'm like, why would a beautiful, powerful mutant superhero woman sort of take up with an artificial being? It didn't quite make sense back then, but as you kept on reading and as you sort of understood the characters' personalities, I'm sure there's a name for this type of relationship. Is it pansexual at this point, or I don't know what you'd call it today? But you know, Wanda digs the robots, and we take that for granted as comic book readers. But I see so much on social media that people are like, "Wow, this is kind of weird." It's like, it gets weirder, guys. You know, if you're willing to do a deep dive, but. Love that aspect of it. And I love the show. I think Jack Schaefer and company have really created something very meticulous. I love the dialogue most of all in the show. I love the repartee, the timing. It's really crisp. She's a fantastic writer. And I know the fandom is sort of mixed about some of her ideas when it comes to other projects she's working on in the MCU. But she did a heck of a job when it comes to WandaVision. The attention to detail on the sets, the props, the wallpaper you'll see in some places, the facades, just incredibly realized in terms of a show, and then hiding Easter eggs and all of that. So really love what they're doing here, even though it is really high concept. I can't say that I come from a background where I watched a lot of sitcoms growing up and that I know the Dick Van Dyke Show in every episode, or that I know Bewitched. I used to love watching Bewitched because it had this sci-fi sort of magic element to it. So of course I was there for that. But I will say that what really is keeping me fascinated about this is, once again, the MCU has created a huge amount of engagement when it comes to WandaVision. And I think that's really the watchword here. If you're looking to try and encapsulate everything that they're doing with WandaVision with one word, is once again, Kevin Feige has found a way to draw you in. And this time it's not a quest for putting together 5 or 6 Infinity Stones. Now it's a mystery. What is happening here? It's quite clear to me that Wanda might be being assailed from the outside. Maybe she's in an astral plane or another dimension, a pocket world or something. And she has control of this, but I think it's in response to some type of trauma that's been enacted upon her from the exterior of this world. And she's kind of dragged all of these people into this recreation, which really takes me to the part of Grandmaster's question about comic book references. So, if you even do a little bit of reading on the interwebs, you can sort of become a pseudo expert in the comic book references really quickly. But without quoting it chapter and verse, WandaVision takes a lot from a lot of places, some of them obvious, some of them not so obvious. But House of M, obviously, the famous story in the Marvel universe about Wanda's psychotic break with reality and how she uses this chaos magic and probability powers to sort of change the world in a way that it does not have mutants, with her famous line that I won't repeat here. I think that everyone knows it. But in any event, so this takes a lot from House of M. I saw a lot coming from Visions, right? The Tom King series of the early 2000s, which put Vision in a suburban sort of setting where he had created a family for himself of synthetic beings and interacting with that family, trying to put himself in that particular setting. Really weird series for comic book readers because while it does have action and mystery and a little bit of horror, it was really kind of played as this straight drama, the way Tom King likes to wrap his narratives, if you've ever read anything from him, including Mr. Miracle. But there's House of M, there's Visions. I think they've taken a little bit from the Wanda, it was called Vision and the Scarlet Witch, and it was a 12-issue maxi series in the comic books where we followed Vision and the Scarlet Witch for an entire year, a whole run of comic books in which they had their own adventures, and kind of new things came out about the characters during that maxi series. You could hardly call it a mini series at 12 issues. But I think there's even stuff coming out of it from the West Coast Avengers, where Wanda and Vision were pretty prominent in that comic book during the 80s and 90s. So there's a lot in terms of comic book references to unpack. But again, I feel like as an ambassador for my fandom, I don't want casuals to sort of get caught up in, I got to get all these back issues to really understand what's going on here. I think the crux of this is we're stuck in a mystery where Wanda has, for some reason, constructed this idyllic fantasy world based on a sitcom, and there are holes in it. And that's where it gets really engaging, where the facade starts to break down, right? It gets a little creepy, or people go on repeat, or something happens that bothers her and she's kind of able to spool things back or make the illusion even deeper. And that's what is keeping me really engaged. I want to say a couple of things about some of the criticisms I've heard about the show, just really quickly, about it being too short. So it being too short, I don't really find it to be a valid criticism. Sure, a half hour isn't a whole ton of content, but I think when Netflix was sort of spooling out hour-long episodes of Iron Fist and giving you all the episodes at once, we were like, oh my God, this is too much. This is too much content. I can't take it all in, and it feels padded. Now Disney is like, well, we're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to make it shorter, and we're going to go week to week. And now here we are with the fans having the opposite dilemma. So there's no really pleasing our kind fan folk, right? But in any event, I kind of think that it's just the right bite-sized portion per week to get you thinking about the whole thing, and you don't binge it and sort of end the conversation quicker than you should. But this really justifies the existence of Disney Plus. It so much justifies it because you are able to do something that's really high concept, that gets people talking about it, that you couldn't quite do in a 4-quadrant blockbuster where you have to make the entire world happy with your movie in terms of the profitability and risk profile for it. But in Disney Plus, you can be a little bit, I want to say edgier, a little bit more experimental. And I think that this says something about the longevity of the MCU if we can keep doing things like this at Disney Plus, where it's more of a hand-to-hand buy and you're paying your subscription dollars a month rather than, you and 5,000 people have to sort of really be happy with it. But I love the show. I think it's brilliant. And I'm very anxious to see what happens in the coming episodes, where the discussion takes us with sitcoms, because this is a conversation. We're going through these different eras, looking at these different shows, and sitcoms as an art form, as an American art form, evolved over time. The basics were there: half hour, lots of comedy, lots of jokes, warmth, usually built around the family. And that's going to evolve as the American culture evolves. So what they're doing here is really hugely ambitious. And I, for one, will be somewhat disappointed if they're not considered for Emmys or other types of peer recognition.
Yeah, we'll see about that. I think the length of the show actually is perfect because it's sitcom length. So if you're doing sitcoms, then you don't make an hour-long sitcom. You make 20 minutes to half an hour. So that's actually the reason I think it is. And we know the total size of the show is going to be 6 hours and 9 episodes. So if the first 6 episodes are sitcom based, so that would mean it would be like 3 hour long. Then you have 3 episodes long, 1 hour of content coming in the last 3 episodes, probably. So that's something to look forward to. But that will be more like a Marvel movie, but we will discuss that a little bit later. Right now, I want to go to my final panel member, and that's Mr. ArArArchStanton. And my question to you is, what were your thoughts about these 2 episodes, and how you see the show moving forward?
Well, I've got some ideas on how I see it moving forward, but to get there, I want to start and run with the ball that Deathman just set up here a little bit, starting with the TV setting. I think this is more clever than people are giving it credit for right now in a number of different ways. First, number one, it's the ideal format. A lot of these different shows and story arcs that they're going to go through, moving it to a TV setting is in no way any sort of like step down. As we've seen, the quality of this show, first of all, is world class. But second, they need this room to breathe. I was just thinking as we were talking about those little tiny moments that we've had with Wanda and Vision so far, whether it's way back in Civil War where they just had the cooking scene, whether it's Infinity War where we get this one moment where they snuck away together right before Vision gets assailed by the Black Order. But now we get to let them kind of live and breathe and see how that relationship sort of functions on a deeper level than just a quick little blip in a larger movie. So I'm loving that. Second is it reflects the theme of what this show is. What better way to start off a Marvel Disney Plus than with a classic television themed show? I think it's fantastic, and I think it reflects just really what's going on with this. But perhaps most importantly is it allows for her character growth in a number of different ways. First of all, I don't know what happened to Wanda. I really don't. Something obviously traumatic is going on here, and she is encapsulating this in an ideal vision of life, which especially early on in classic television was what classic television was. You had these idealistic sort of lives that people were living in, and she gets to kind of live in that now. Why she's doing it, not quite sure. We may get there in just a second, but as we've seen, they're going to progress through the ages, and a lot of shows got to more realistic type of family lives. Maybe once you get up to something like Roseanne, is much more something that just your average person might be experiencing, where it's it's not an ideal family. They argue, they bicker, they have little just different discussions that aren't the ideal life. But you're going to see her progress to that, and it allows her to do that. It also allows her, possibly, it looks like, to advance in age in a way, like maybe her kids suddenly grow up, but she's somehow still not aware that they're doing this over a short span. She's just somehow seeing it take place. You know what I mean? They kind of compress 10, 15 years. I don't know how long they're going to go with this into like a shorter span, but she's not aware of it in some way, and they use this as a story building element to allow her to do that. And that's where it gets into the psychology of this character. I think the psychology of what's going on here is the real question. What is happening here? Like, you see things like the sword helicopter that she finds in the bush. I've got thoughts on this. I've got an idea that maybe this is more like a dream situation where outside stimuli in a dream can somehow be incorporated into your dream in sort of a way. Maybe somebody comes in and makes a sound, and while you're dreaming, somehow this becomes a part of your dream. Is that what's going on there? It's hard to say. She seems somewhat aware of what's going on, but not fully aware of what's going on. So I'm really wondering at what level of her conscious or subconscious this is really taking place in. Is she just in complete denial? I don't know. The way that beekeeper scene kind of went, it makes me wonder. Like, she sees him, she seems to know that something is going on. It's almost like she has this look of recognition in her eye that she really knows what's going on, and she completely rejects it. Is that what's going on? It's a little hard to say. I know we're going to find this out, but those moments really made me wonder what's happening in her head right now. I guess I just want to say, in terms of how Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen are playing this, I think it's great how the way they're acting it. They've really balanced this out. They're obviously having fun with the parts, but they hit those moments, maybe at the dinner table scene at the end of episode 1, or especially that moment I just mentioned with the beekeeper, or even Paul Bettany's acting when he's almost like a drunk magician after the gum incident. All of that just seems so much fun, but also they play up the amount of dread that's kind of slowly simmering in the background, and I think they're doing a fantastic job with that. But I say all that to get to what you just asked me, where this show is headed. I think, and I thought ever since I saw the trailer, when you saw Monica Rambeau fly through some sort of barrier, I think this is a real place. I don't know what city it's in, but I think she or somebody else, it may not be Wanda, it may be somebody else, has encapsulated the city in some sort of bubble of delusion, for lack of a better word. And everybody you're seeing is perhaps a real person who has been brought in to play this part. To exist into facilitating this delusion that Wanda's in. She may not be doing this to herself. I really don't think she is, and I'm suspicious that Dottie, who we met at that party, might be behind this. I'm not sure if she's the one, but I do think she's in on it. There was a key little line that Catherine Hahn's character, who is around Wanda all the time, obviously, she said, it kind of went maybe a little bit talked about, but it's gone relatively unnoticed. And she mentioned something very similar to the line of, well, you don't always know where the devil is, or something very similar to that. And it made me, that pricked my eyebrows a little bit. I started to think about Mephisto, or perhaps some sort of other demonic entity that might be behind this. I wondered if that was perhaps Dottie. Maybe it's another character that we haven't seen. Maybe it's the beekeeper. I don't really know. Well, the beekeeper, now that I think about it, I believe is some sort of sword agent. But it made me really wonder who's behind this. I think there's some sort of entity that is keeping Wanda subdued. I think what has happened is she is perhaps in a coven, or if you play with that term a little bit, maybe Catherine Hahn's character's in it, maybe Dottie's into it, and that coven of witches, perhaps, or other magical people are attempting to use Wanda to some end. Not sure what that is, but I believe that might be what is going to draw in Doctor Strange. As we know, him and Mordo were both interested in other magical people that were around. Mordo himself had said that he was going to eliminate other magical people, so we know those exist, and I think that's what's going on with Wanda right here. I think she's being used by a coven of witches. I'm just going to go with that for right now.
Well, that's very interesting and a good answer. Thank you for that. Lord Deathman, you had a follow-up.
I did. First off, very insightful answer from Stanton. So really appreciated hearing that take on it and the speculation in terms of where the show could go. What I wanted to add to it, or at least follow on, was first off, I really love the performances by Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen. They're great together. They have fantastic chemistry, and I don't think anyone can really doubt the level of quality they're bringing to these performances. The subtext of the soap opera, they have to, the sitcom, they have to do that piece, and then they kind of have to make it seem as if it's simulated, right? Not actually happening as a sitcom, but that there's something going on underneath it as well. And I think that they're balancing both of those very well. But I also wanted to talk about just the history of the characters in the MCU and some of the things that you're seeing, particularly the helicopter, which is a sword helicopter. You see a logo on it, but it does have that red and chrome or red and gold appearance of an Iron Man armor, which kind of gets you thinking about Stark. They have the commercial with the toaster in it. And that being said, Stark plays a very important part in Wanda's history in the MCU. It's Stark munitions that levels her village to the ground, right? So some of that actually playing out subconsciously in this simulation, whether the simulation is of her own design or if someone has imprisoned her in it. I can't quite speculate as well as Stanton could on those kinds of things. But I will say that Stark is this critical piece of her history that just shows you that this thinks back far in terms of the history of the MCU. The second piece, the Strucker watch, right? It's no accident that it's a Strucker watch. It was Strucker who did the experimentations on Wanda and her brother that led them to developing these powers. So every single piece of this is tied. We're not just seeing random historical Easter eggs that just, are from the MCU in general. Everything you're seeing really does tie back to her history, and thinking on that level of thinking in detail is why I'm a fan of the MCU, period.
Yeah. Well, I had also some idea of what's being said earlier, some ideas to add on. I thought the whole sequence at the planning committee meeting was a bit odd to me as well, and I got a different vibe from it. I think Dottie is scared to death. She is scared of Wanda. At least that's the vibe I got. She basically is aware she's being imprisoned, and she thinks Wanda is doing it, and she doesn't trust Wanda to not harm her. It's basically what she said. So I got a completely different vibe from it. I think Agnes is more important than it meets the eye. I read the Brandon Davis theory. It's not my own. Credits where credits due, where you split the name Agnes into Agatha Harkness. Agatha Harkness. That's what he said, and that's a witch, and not a kind witch, if I'm correct. Maybe Lord Deathman can correct me if I'm wrong, but she's villainous, I believe. So
Primarily,
yeah,
I think she's villainous turned mentor to Wanda at some point in the comic book and back and forth. So she's one of those characters where the pendulum could swing either way.
okay, well, that's actually more interesting then. But and
Yeah,
the
but
beekeeper.
she's also a mentor to Reed Richards' son.
I think the beekeeper is. I thought I saw a sword on his back, so I think he's a sword agent. Just to be. But Mr. Taylor first had a remark, so I will gladly give the word to him.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some of the same thoughts that Arch and yourself had. But right now, I have far more questions than I have answers or speculation after just two episodes. But I agree with you that I thought Dottie was afraid, but I didn't get the impression she was afraid of Wanda. I thought she was afraid of something else, which goes back to Arch. I think Wanda's power is doing this, or at least partially doing it, but I'm not sure she's controlling it. I think someone is controlling her and using her powers to create this, and she has like almost like you said, a dream state. She has some awareness of it, but not much, and the level of awareness and clarity seems to go up and down a little bit with her. But the other thing I wanted to comment on, when you were talking about the meeting with the women and how strange it was, the meeting with Vision and the men in that library hall of doom or whatever the heck they were in, I thought that was very strange. The setting was very strange. It was dark. It was not a typical 50s, 60s sitcom suburban neighborhood setting. If you look at that cavernous room they were in with the wood and the lighting and the shadows, it seemed like a very dark place that they were having that meeting, even though they were all just joking around and not talking about neighborhood watch stuff at all. It struck me as strange, which is just raises more questions in my mind.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention the dinner scene. Because that was very interesting. Like that was really quite spooky. Like the wife kept on saying, stop it, stop it, stop it. And then because they were trying to remember their past lives or trying to remember like something anyway, like Wanda and Vision. But it also took them a little bit to react to saving that guy's life. I mean, the guy was dying before your very eyes. I mean, like, are you going to do something or not? So I thought it was a bit very, very strange.
That came across to me as if Vision cannot act on his own. He has to have command from Wanda, because Vision is dead, and I think Wanda created him and has to guide him to do stuff. That's how it came across to me. I also don't trust Mrs. Hart completely. She was very odd on the dinner scene. Maybe she has a bigger role to play that we are not aware of. But Taylor has another comment.
Yeah, what struck me about that scene was it was when he was asking questions, when he was threatening to tear down the facade, is when he started to choke. Something caused him to die. And then I agree 100% that everything kind of froze. The wife just kind of kept repeating the same words over and over, even though her husband was dying on the floor. So everything just kind of froze there for a second. The program glitched or something. I don't know how to describe it. But to me, the thing that made it happen was the questioning and not having the answers, not being able to reply.
I go to Lord Deathman first before I move to Arch.
Just wanted to add a quick bit of speculation, and speculation really isn't my game. I really want to stay in the present moment with this show rather than do what I've seen in social media where people are guessing themselves into these really tight and specific corners. I think you really kind of set yourself up for disappointment when those things don't play out, unless you see things that are just more delightful than what you were hoping for. But one of the things that I noticed that I don't think anyone is really having a lot of discussion around is Vision's job. So when he goes there, he's kind of this human compute unit that sits down and does this really fast typing. And if I were to speculate, I think as a part of him being resurrected into this simulation, that whoever has engineered this, be it Wanda or an external force, they may be using Vision as a part of powering the simulation, that just the raw compute power of his AI. And the job within the simulation turns out to be some kind of metaphor for that, his role in it. But that's the only speculation that I have. And I also wanted to say that one of the biggest concerns I had about the series was when you look at the fandom dialogue, it's always about Wanda leveling up and Wanda having this incredible moment and Wanda. And I know the cult of Lizzie Olsen is real, right? There's no shy. You say something bad about them and you're going to be stuck in an endless loop on Twitter in Olsen Twitter for a good couple of hours. But I was incredibly happy to see that this is a 50-50 partnership when you watch this show. The Vision part of WandaVision is equally important as the Wanda part. I was thrilled. Just want to know if any of the other champions was kind of relieved to see that dynamic.
Absolutely. Arch.
Yeah, I was totally thrilled to see that dynamic. I agree with you. It is their show, and it really is. I'm glad to see them operating a couple. That kind of goes back to what I talked about earlier, is just a chance to see them breathe and be a couple for an extended period of time. I think that's fantastic. And I also agree with Deathman here that over speculating gets a lot of people in trouble. I always caution people about that in general, to not make too many predictions, because what you do is you start to get married to them. You start justifying them to yourself over and over and over and trying to find more and more and more that fits that. And then when it inevitably doesn't happen, you're like, oh, but they should have done this instead. So don't do that. But I do want to follow up on what Taylor was saying, is that with the dinner scene, the scene at the end with the beekeeper where she says no and she goes back, it does really have that, glitch in the Matrix sort of vibe, similar, tying into what Deathman just said about Vision's job perhaps being engineered as well. It does really have that quality that all of that fits together, and somebody, even at the end of the first episode where they kind of panned back out and you see somebody sitting in a control panel, I don't know if that's literally who's controlling it or not, but there's all these indications that somebody is definitely controlling this. Even the sword message, maybe this is just in her head, but they did say, Wanda, who's doing this to you. All of that does tie in. Maybe the dinner scene is literally, something was going not to plan, and they kind of were like, hang on, we got to reset this a little bit. And then all of a sudden everything's great, and almost immediately after that they save him, everybody's happy, and he leaves, and that's the end. So it does really feel manipulated. I'm curious where that goes and who's behind it. But I did want to add one other thing that I neglected to mention earlier, was you kind of touched on it at the beginning, but just the moment I saw the Marvel theme, the MCU logo come back up, I just kind of sat back and just relaxed and took it easy. That was so enjoyable just to see that whole theme come up and watch that for the first time in so long. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this show.
Yeah, it did feel like we were back in church and pray and enjoying the goodness of the Lord. Taylor.
Yeah, I agree completely with Arch about the over speculation. It really, it's counterproductive. It doesn't do any good. Sit back and watch the show and see what happens, as opposed to trying to control what happens. And I also wanted to follow up on Lord Deathman with the job. I had the exact same thought at first, that someone was using Vision to do something with computers in that job. But then I kept asking myself, well, isn't he dead? So this means he actually exists. Then he has been resurrected. He's not just a figment of Wanda's imagination. Or is he? Are we just completely wrong that he's not actually doing anything at that job? It's just something that he does to fulfill the fantasy. So again, more questions than answers on all of that.
Well, there's one thing I just want to add to what you actually said all the way in the beginning, Taylor, about the sitcoms and everything. What I found really beautiful is that the show Bewitched is the show that switched from black and white to color. And in episode 2, they exactly do that. At the end, they switch from black and white to color. It was a perfect homage, and it brings us further into the modern era. Taylor?
The opening credits of episode 2, of course, were also a great homage to the Bewitched credits. Very well done there.
Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in terms of the job, I didn't even think about that. That's kind of a mystery too. But I was thinking, since we touched on it, Vision could just easily be his job. He could just be trying to block the agents from getting through by way of Wanda doing it. If she's actually manipulating him, she could just be trying to block that from the agents from invading her personal space.
Yeah. Like the panel has said, we will just have to wait and see. I think that will conclude our review for the first 2 episodes of of WandaVision. Please make sure to join us again next week when we talk about the third episode. And in the meantime, check out Sakaar, join us, like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube so you won't miss it when the new video comes out. In other words, join our community. You can find all the links in the description below. We hope to see you soon. Bye.